Cautious optimism despite polycrisis. That's the view of the head of the World Trade Organization as more than 100 trade ministers meet in Geneva. It's their first ministerial conference in almost 5 years. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said that she hopes 1 or 2 global deals could be achieved this week, but she also warned of a bumpy economic path. Hosuk Lee-Makiyama is director at the European Centre for International Political Economy. Does he think there are grounds for optimism?
Well, every DG, Director General of an international organization, would have to say that. WTO is very different from other international organizations in the sense that all the 160 plus members actually has a veto, which basically means that the smallest possible country to the largest players like Europe to China and United States can block any deal that is on the table. What we are looking at here at this current ministerial, it's not so much new deliverables, but the focus is entirely almost on items that are actually not about backtracking existing deliverables that has been agreed at previous ministerials. Number of them has a automatic sunset clause, which means that unless they actually renewed at each ministerial, they will actually expire. So that means that, for example, the global ban on tariffs on data transmissions or peace clause on trade dispute over intellectual property and a number of other items could actually be taken off the table rather than actually new deals that we are looking at here.
We remember how hostile the Trump administration was towards the WTO. How have things changed, if they have, and which countries are and are not being constructive?
Well, let's say like this. I mean, the Trump administration was perhaps most spectacular in its way. It actually demonstrated and actually presented its position in the WTO, including crippling the dispute settlement body, which is the heart of the WTO enforcement mechanism that makes sure that all the members follow its rules. However, these positions are not that different from previous U.S. administration, including the Obama administrations, as well as the current Biden ones. It's really not so much about, let's say, actual political positions. This is more about table manners, where the Trump administration was vastly different. Everything else is actually about core national interests. So the U.S. position has been pretty firm and pretty consistent. However, we have seen some flexibilities, for example, on issues like intellectual property, where the more progressive Biden administration is actually willing to talk to the developing countries to find a solution, for example, on vaccine waivers for the poorest countries that goes beyond what's currently agreed. And in addition, we have countries, for example, like India and South Africa, who will not agree to anything. And they don't actually want other countries to agree, although they are not a part of that agreement. So they're actually even opposing coalition of willing constellations within the WTO. Those who want to liberalize could be able to do so, but basically India and South Africa has actually been opposing to that. And in addition, we have the current situation around Russia and Ukraine. The conflict, of course, runs through like a, let's say, elephant in the room, through all the rooms, which basically means that at any point Russia could actually exercise its veto, or they could just decide to let the world play whatever way it wants to. We need to bear in mind that both Russia and the rest of the world has actually taken up various kind of trade embargoes and sanctions against each other. So these exceptions for security, on the grounds of national security, is something that is claimed by all parties in order to impose these trade sanctions. China has actually played a remarkably constructive role, and although it is always portrayed as there is a trade war going on between China and the United States, or China and so-called the West, China is actually agreeing with Europe and the United States on the importance of banning tariffs on data transmissions and constructively playing along and negotiating, although with a slightly different outcome in mind, perhaps, on very topical issues like e-commerce. So, in other words, the world is not always as it seemed.